immediate action is needed under this critical situation. So whether we can still have participatory question I would like to raise. Second question I would like to raise is the risk of decision. We have recently seen, once again over these few months, that what has been happening to the school and college examination system, for example, that we have seen many kinds of I would say notifications, contradictory notifications coming in, circulating every 2 weeks. And then finally, we have seen that at least the class 12 board examinations have been done away with this year. So this is a very crucial decision. The risk of taking this the decision falls under, I would say, administering bodies. You see, what will happen to the fate of these children who were supposed to appear for the examination? Do they sit for the examination, or do we try to consider the health issue, and as a result we cancel the examination? What will be the consequences? 20 years hence, these children might blame us for taking a decision. So that is also the risk of taking a decision, risk of governance, which I feel is becoming very. This is a ground reality of governance right at this moment, that every decision on the part of any authority, whether it is a academic authority or it is an administering authority, there will be some maybe some positive, but some very negative consequences in the coming future. And the risk remains there for taking the decision. Who's going to take the such decisions? And the third question is that of executing governance. Executing governance, like, for example, only I was out today. I had to go to my college today. So throughout the entire way, and my way is quite a long way, it takes me about 50 to 55 minutes to travel. I have seen people on the road mostly without mask, mostly not maintaining social distance, mostly not wearing a helmet. If they're wearing a helmet, they're not wearing a mask. So during this period, how are you going to implement the orders, the rules, and the laws? Who is going to be in charge, and how can they, because we do not really have any severe, what should I say? I should not say strictures or severe, not punishment. I would rather not say punishment. Some strict way of, imparting these rules and laws. So who's going to take the consequence? Who's going to bear the result of this kind of not listening to? This is not just happening in India or Kolkata, absolutely. This is happening all over the world. In fact, last Saturday, I believe I saw in England, a sea beach being absolutely terribly crowded without any social distance being followed or any mask whatsoever. So who's going to take the charge of doing this? How can it be done? So what I feel is that that under this pandemic situation, under this very unusual situation, a new normal setup of rules of executing governance is bound to come up. We are going to see a sea change in our ways of governance, I believe, and this change might might make existing theories questionable. So this is where I feel there was this need of this webinar today, where we would be able to listen to such distinguished erudite speakers as to the situation of governance under such extreme conditions. That is my absolute personal perception about the governance. But before I end, I would like to share my screen, if I may. And I'd like to, sorry, something went wrong. Okay. I'd like to show, we have had collaboration. We have had a collaboration with the Department of Statistics, All India Institute of Hygiene and Public Health, and Shorbani was our was in the core team, and we have been able to publish the report, and it has come out terribly well. It is related to this topic, so I am trying to show this there. Sorry, just a minute. This is our this is the report that has been published. So Amit, why cannot I share my screen? Hello. There, present now. Entire screen. I have done it many times. There. Can you see it? Can everyone see it? Hello? Did you all get to see it? Did you all get to see the report?
Actually,
Yes.
This was a formal publication of this report. Now we are going to put it up in our website. So if you want to see the report, you can see the report. Okay. So thank you. And I am very eager to listen to all our very distinguished speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Rumadi. I'm just telling about the report because it was not seen properly. Actually, it was situational assessment survey during lockdown over 5 colleges. The survey has been done through Google Form, and it was done over the students of 5 colleges of Kolkata, North 24 Parganas, and Howrah. And it is a collaboration with All India Institute of Hygiene and Public Health. I hope sometimes you can see it in our website. And now, thank you, Rumadi. And I now request our IQAC coordinator, Dr. Shweta Guho, under whose leadership Vijay Krishna Girls College has been a hub of activities for last few years, to deliver her talk.
Thank you, Sharbani. I welcome all our distinguished speakers, dignitaries, my colleagues, and all participants to today's international webinar on issues of governance in COVID-19 era. The novel coronavirus has wreaked havoc across the world. Since late 2019, this COVID-19 has thrown unprecedented challenges to national and international governance systems. Now we are in such a situation. On one hand, we are under lockdown, and on the other hand, we are facing different phases of unlocking the lockdown. So, understanding the need of the hour, Department of Political Science has taken a great initiative organizing today's webinar in collaboration with Bengal Institute of Political Science. I extend my sincere gratitude to Dr. Rajkumar Kothari and Dr. Bishwanath Chakraborty for their support and cooperation. Thank you everyone for being with us, and best of luck to the department and of course to the convener. Thank you. Sharbani, unmute. Sharbani.
Thank you, Shweta. Now, without wasting a single moment, I prefer to go into our main session and our first speaker of this evening, who is none other than eminent virologist, Dr. Amitav Nandi, a man of Himalayan knowledge on this issue. Dr. Nandi has a towering experience of over 30 years with School of Tropical Medicine, Kolkata. He is an advisor with ICMR and is also associated with World Health Organization. From the very beginning of this frenzied phase, He is constantly engaged in generating awareness in dealing with COVID-19. Now, it's over to Dr. Nandi. Sir, please. Sir, please. Hello.
Professor Nandi, please unmute yourself. Unmute, please. There is a bottom.
Sir, you have to click on the microphone. Hello? Sir?
Sir, এবার শুরু করতে।
Sir, there is a microphone sign in your mobile.
না, ওনার কেটে গেছে মনে হচ্ছে। অমিত দাঁড়াও। I think it's just got disconnected.
ছবিটা ক্লিন হয়ে গেছে, অমিত একটু বলতে হবে।
স্যার, আপনি আপনার মাইক্রোফোনে মিউট করুন, এই আনমিউট করুন। Now
Hello.
He's not there, দাঁড়াও। There.
মাইক্রোফোন সিম্বলটাতে একটু প্রেস করুন, একটু তাহলেই হবে।
মাইক্রোফোনটাতে একটা টিক করুন স্যার। একটা ওনাকে একটুখানি কেউ ফোন করে বলবে?
আমি মেসেজ করছি, কারণ উনি তো ফোনেই করছেন।
ও আচ্ছা আচ্ছা, সো সরি।
অমিত, প্রফেসর নন্দী লেফট করেছেন একটু।
আমার মনে হয় উনি বেরিয়ে গেছেন।
তো ফোন নাম্বারটা যার কাছে আছে একটু ফোন করুন, কারণ মিটিং লেফট হয়ে গেছে।
Hello? It's not here yet. Has he joined? No. উনি নিজেকে ডিসকানেক্ট করে ফেলেছেন।
হ্যাঁ, ওনারটা তো হলো না, উনি বোধহয় পড়েননি।
না মেসেজ করতে পারবেন না। শোনো, তুমি একটা করো,
বলছি সর্বাণী ফোন করে রাখো না।
ফোন করলাম আমি।
এসে গেছে।
দাঁড়াও স্যার, আপনার মাইক্রোফোন সাইনটাতে একবার ক্লিক করুন। স্যার, আপনার মাইক্রোফোন সাইনটা দেখতে পাচ্ছেন?
ওটাকে একটু আনমিউট করতে হবে স্যার।
জাস্ট ক্লিক করলেই আনমিউট হয়ে যাবে। হয়নি এখনো স্যার, হয়নি এখনো হয়নি স্যার।
মাইক্রোফোনটাকে আনমিউট। আপনি মাইক্রোফোনের মতো সাইনটা রয়েছে না, ওটার উপরেই একটা ক্রস দিন।
আচ্ছা,
আরেকবার ক্লিক করুন স্যার। ওইটাতে আরেকবার ক্লিক করুন স্যার।
শুনতে পাচ্ছেন না নাকি?
শুনতে পাচ্ছেন না স্যার? শুনতে পাচ্ছেন?
স্যার, আপনি শুনতে পাচ্ছেন?
না না
না, উনি তো বললেন
ফোনটাও ধরছেন না। ফোনটা ধরছেন না, আমি ফোন তো করে যাচ্ছি।
উনি আবার নিচে চলে গেছেন।
আমি কি ফোন করব আরেকবার?
আমি তো বলছি
ফোন করছি তো, কিন্তু উনি নিতে পারছেন না।
ওনাকে আমরা শুনতে পাচ্ছি, কিন্তু উনি শুনতে পাচ্ছেন না।
সবাই ফোন করো, সময় নষ্ট করো, ফোন করছি তো। মেক আ কল।
হ্যাঁ স্যার, আপনাকে না আনমিউট করতে হবে। আপনার যেটা মাইক্রোফোনের সাউন্ড আছে, একটা সাইন আছে, ওই জায়গাটাকে আপনাকে ক্লিক করতে হবে। আমরা আপনাকে শুনতে পাচ্ছি না, যার জন্য। হ্যাঁ, আপনি ওই আপনি লিংকটায় ঢুকে যেখানটা মাইক্রোফোনের সাইনটা পাচ্ছেন ওখানটা ক্লিক করুন। আপনার কথা আমরা শুনতে পাবো। ঠিক আছে? Technology based things are always
না অ্যাকচুয়ালি না, ফোন থেকে হ্যান্ডেল করাটা একটু টাফ হয়, কারণ এত ছোট ছোট ইয়েটা তো মানে সামটাইমস ইট বিকামস আ লিটল বিট অফ এ প্রবলেম ইস্যু। ঠিক আছে, হয়ে যাবে ধরো। উনি এখনো জয়েন করতে পারেননি।
না, লিঙ্কটা
Should we? হ্যাঁ স্যার, স্যার হ্যালো
হ্যালো, হ্যাঁ
স্যার, হচ্ছে না
তাহলে পরের
স্যার,
স্পিকারকে চলে যাই।
আমরা শুনতে পাচ্ছি না স্যার।
হুম।
এই যে দেখুন একটা
আচ্ছা,
মাইক্রোফোনের
আচ্ছা।
সাইন আছে আপনার এর উপরে, আপনার স্ক্রিনের উপরে একটা মাইক্রোফোন আছে, ওইটাকে ক্লিক করুন স্যার, মাইক্রোফোনের সাইনটা ক্লিক করুন। আপনি করছেন না? বাট দেন ইটস নট ওয়ার্কিং। আপনি আপনি আপনার কানের এটা খুলে এমনি ডাইরেক্টলি করুন না স্যার। হ্যাঁ, টেক ইট অফ। আপনি একদম ডাইরেক্টলি কথা বলুন, দেখুন হয় কিনা। হ্যালো, ওটাকে ওই হেডফোনটাকে ফোন থেকে খুলে নিন স্যার। খুলেছেন? আপনার আমি লিপ রিড করছি। হ্যাঁ, কিন্তু আপনার একটা মাইক্রোফোন মতো এরকম একটা সাইন আছে স্যার। লেট মি শো ইউ। এটা ইয়ে হয়ে আছে।
ওনাকে কি আরেকবার লিঙ্কটা পাঠানো হবে নাকি?
না, উনি আছেন তো।
হ্যাঁ,
উনি
না না,
আছেন, উনি অনলাইন আছেন। হ্যাঁ, অ্যাকচুয়ালি না অডিওটাতে সমস্যা হচ্ছে।
অডিওটা
স্যার,
সমস্যা হয়ে যাচ্ছে। হ্যাঁ
স্যার
স্যার,
একটা ফুলের মতো মাইকের মতো রয়েছে না, ওটাকে ক্লিক করুন।
একটা মাইকের মতো এরকম লম্বা মতো ক্রস হয়ে আছে, লাল হয়ে, দেখুন লাল হয়ে ক্রস হয়ে আছে।
ছবিটার উপর একবার ক্লিক করুন, তাহলে উপরে তিনটে ভেসে উঠবে।
মাঝে দেখুন ক্রস হয়ে আছে, দেখতে পেয়েছেন? আবার বোধহয়
এবার শুনতে পাচ্ছি।
হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ, এবার শোনা যাচ্ছে। হ্যাঁ, ওখান থেকে।
রাইট।
হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ স্যার।
আচ্ছা, দেখাও যাবে।
আপনি বলতে থাকুন।
হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ, বলুন
Okay.
স্যার। হুম
Okay.
হুম।
Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, I'm extremely sorry.
No, it's okay.
Good afternoon. It's a very, very great experience on my part to be with you in this afternoon, in this kind of a webinar, which at my age we are very newcomer to this field of arranging seminars instead of gathering in a hall. However, well, the introductory remarks which have been made by my predecessors, the speakers, they have raised very pertinent issues regarding the COVID management, the nature of the disease, the pandemic, and what we are observing in our day-to-day life in our own country and state and the city. What I have planned is that I would be giving you little bit idea about the disease aspect of the virus. Local politics, the governance, the society, and blah blah. So to start with, as you know, COVID-19 is a disease which is caused by a type of coronavirus which is known as SARS-CoV-2, which belongs to the beta coronavirus group. The target organ, the main target organs being human respiratory system and the gastrointestinal system. The virus gets entry into our body through mouth, nose, and conjunctiva in our eyes. The virus gets attachment to the mucosal cells present in these two organs through binding onto receptors which are known as ACE2, which are present in the lungs, human gastrointestinal tract, particularly the small intestine, the kidney, and blood vessels. Now, with this, I wanted to give you an idea about, as I told you about the entry of the virus, the mode of entry. You can also imagine how the virus gets exit from the, how it comes out of the body through two routes. One is through mouth and nose, and the other one is through stool, that means from the intestinal tract. Now, the virus gets entry into our body in two different ways. That is a direct entry into our organs through droplet infection, droplets falling on our through cough and sneezing, through cough and sneezing onto our mucosa present in the nose, the lips, the mouth cavity, and the conjunctiva. And indirectly, it can also get entry through all these three entry points like conjunctiva, nose, and mouth, by using the fomites of the patients or infected individuals and contaminated surface and articles, like say sharing a mobile phone from a person who is already infected. Now, there has been no evidence so far available to suggest that there is at all any kind of hematogenous spread like that happens in case of hepatitis or HIV. And similarly, we do not have any evidence of sexual mode of transmission excepting through kissing. Now, direct skin-to-skin transfer is also not being identified. So also, there has been no vector which is incriminated to be responsible for transferring the virus from one person to the other. Now, clinically, after entry into the host, clinically, the disease manifestation may take on an average 3 days to 14 days. That is known as incubation period. And clinically, after completing the incubation period, it is better to tell you at this point that the incubation period, although we know in general, by and large, it is 3 to 14 days, but it can be as long as more than 40 days. So once you cross 14 days means that you just don't lose the chance of getting the disease or manifesting the disease in future. Now, the manifestation-wise, the disease can be classified into different categories. Particularly, the majority of the individuals, they remain asymptomatic, although they are infected. They remain asymptomatic, but that means without any signs and symptoms. And once they cross that barrier, some of the people, they enter into the next phase, that is a mild to moderate degree of manifestation. And once at this stage, the patients are not treated according to the guideline or according to whatever is available with us, the treatment methodologies, and also depending upon several other factors. By now, all of you, perhaps you know that comorbidity or coexisting other ailments and diseases, they play a very vital role in modulating the disease pathology, pathogenesis, its nature, a qualitative way, in quantitative way. All those diseases, they can modify the presentation and to take the patient into the other and the terminal stage of the very complicated and severe stage of the disease, and which may lead into a fatal outcome. With all this categorization of the clinical signs symptoms wise the patients, one thing I must reiterate and emphasize that we have been observing in this city, some of the patients, they are having the manifestation in a galloping way. That means around 15 days back, one patient suffers from very short-lasting illness like malaise, like headache, like fever. Within 2-3 days, he or she becomes all right. And again, after 15 days to even 1 month, the patient falls sick again. And this time, the test comes to be positive, while the initial stage, the test remains usually negative, but the second time, with the build-up in the viral load and reappearance of the clinical sign symptom, the patient becomes positive. This is, I told you all these detailed clinical presentation and classification because of making you people aware about not to ignore such clinical sign symptom, however mild it may be, however galloping it may be, even if you see someone saying a history of that, well, I had an illness, a brief illness about 1 or 2 days, about 15 days or 25 days back, please don't ignore that. And these are the cases who unknowingly, without our knowledge, they keep on spreading the virus in the community by their movement. So this is one very dangerous aspect of the disease, and that is why the disease is so dangerous, because of its mode of spread, its speed of spread, and different ways, different manner, different nature of its spread. Now, with these few clinical briefings, now one important aspect I would like to bring into this presentation is that you, all of us in this particular city and this part of the country, India, and as a whole, the entire country, from June, April onwards till say setting of winter, in the month of say November or October, late October or November. This is the period where we see many infectious diseases coming and invading our community. They are broadly classified into a vector-borne disease like mosquito-borne disease like malaria, like dengue, and non-vector-borne disease like typhoid, like swine flu, another viral candidate, swine flu, simple seasonal flu, and so on and so forth. Now, one thing all of us, we must be very careful and aware about that clinically there is a great deal of overlapping in terms of presenting symptoms. For example, fever may be a symptom not only in case of COVID, but also in malaria, typhoid, dengue, chikungunya, whatever it is. Similarly, sore throat or pain in the throat is also shared by other diseases. Even malaria, particularly the vivax malaria, can present itself with simple sore throat and fever. So this is I wanted to bring you before you about this overlapping nature of the diseases and clinical sign symptom, not to ignore such cases, not to ignore that okay, this might be a case of malaria, this might be a case of a dengue, not COVID. So overall, this brings us to a situation that we should suspect not only COVID, but also other diseases with any one of the symptom complex. I believe all of you know by now what are the symptom complex or presenting symptoms commonly seen in case of COVID or commonly told in case of COVID. Now, just a brief list of the symptoms like tiredness, body ache, malaise, fever, stuffiness in the nose, sore throat, loss of appetite, and particularly important finding is loss of smell, and then even diarrhea. Patients are presenting simply with diarrhea, no other things, no fever. Nausea, vomiting, and headache. Besides this, overall, there may be a fever with chill and rigor. So this is just not to confuse you, but to make you aware that such symptom complex, when it is present, you must suspect not only COVID, but also other diseases. Now, coming to the other aspect of governance, when I'll be going to the governance part of the disease, we have to know that what are the points where we need a good governance, good strategic planning in social terms, in political terms, in economic terms, and in medical terms. Now, as I told you, most of the cases are self-limiting, they are short-lasting, often overlooked and ignored by the individual who had the infection. Now, and often not treated. But these are the individuals who had the greatest potential for high degree of transmission to the community. So this is one point. Keep in mind, I'll come back to this point, why and how a type of a strategic planning is needed in this respect to overcome the spread of the infection. Now, once they are not treated, they go to the mild and moderate stage, and again, if they are not treated at that stage, they go to the complicated stage. Particularly, majority of the patients, they die in presence of the comorbidities, as we know. Now, comorbidities may be in the form of diabetes mellitus. These are the commonest comorbidities which influence the outcome of COVID infection. Is diabetes mellitus, hypertension, particularly obesity, kidney disease, HIV, and particularly steroid treatment. Many people, they receive steroid treatment for many diseases, including leukemia, including autoimmune diseases like that. So these are the areas where one has to be very careful about the transformation of an uncomplicated case to a complicated case because of the presence of these comorbidities and supportive treatment and other treatment. Now, other important factor is age. Age of the patient definitely is a very great influencing factor, particularly people aged more than 55. I would be in a safer side to tell you that age of 55 and above would be a better criteria to consider these patients to be under high risk. And therefore, the strategic planning must be done in terms of social habits, in terms of familial habits, in terms of the governmental activities for the protection of these aged individuals, how they can be protected and how they can be managed not to get the infection at all from surrounding people. Now, so with these, now if I'm allowed to tell you, so what are our concerns? Now, the concerns of greatest importance is that this particular virus is a new one and it is a novel virus. It doesn't match with other because we do not have sufficient knowledge to classify, to understand the nature of the virus in various aspects in its life cycle. The second concern is, as I already told you, the very high speed of the spread, which led to the evolution or development of a pandemic. And not all viruses, not all diseases, not all bacteria has the potential to cause a pandemic. There are few organisms which are pandemic prone, some are epidemic prone, and even some other organisms cannot cause even pandemic or epidemic. They remain as a sporadic disease occurring here and there in small numbers. Now, the other important aspect of the virus is its genetic characteristic changes, the ability to very frequently change its genetic character because of the high speed of its replication in the cytoplasm of the cells. Now, majorities of the mild and asymptomatic carrier, person, as I told you, although they do not suffer from the disease, but they are of great importance and great threat to the aged person remaining in the same families. Say, for example, in one family, a young person is having the infection and the same family has 2 or 3 very aged persons. So it may be that that individual will not suffer from the severe disease, but once he transmits the disease to the aged person, they really would be under a high risk of getting a fatal outcome. Now, we have a certain limitations as far as our planning and this thing, because from the beginning we know that we do not have a vaccine, neither we do have a very specific drug to treat the patient, to treat the cases, and nor we do have a very accepted international and uniformly accepted treatment strategy. And these are the drawbacks, these are the limitations in planning, in compliance from not only the health sector, but also from the government, from the society, every part of our society. Now, the other limitation is socio-economic, cultural, and religious and political scenario in our society. Now, they are playing their own role in making the disease highly kind of a, what should I say, it's a kind of a panic situation. People are getting panicked. People have developed a kind of a habit of concealing facts. They really are scared to tell you that I'm suffering from COVID infection because they don't know what is going to happen tomorrow with them. Because right now, right before say half an hour, I got a telephone call. A doctor even, he is scared. His daughter is suffering from COVID, and he is scared that people will not allow them to stay in that housing complex. So this is a scenario, it has its origin from our bad planning, from bad governance, because we didn't bother to take the entire community into our activity of a kind of a participatory activity against the disease. Now the other limitations are insufficient, I shouldn't say only insufficient, but perhaps not only in terms of quantitative insufficiency, but also qualitative insufficiency of our health infrastructure in relation to the standard of health service we are able to provide. And lastly, and not the least and most important, is that our society is not really, I'm sorry to say, our entire society and community is not really educated to that standard where each and every person would understand what we are advising them. As you have been telling that you have crossed 5 minutes of your journey through the road or what you have seen. And this is a gross violation of whatever norms we have set for the control of the pandemic and the situation. So this comes from the mal-education. The people, they do not bother about, they do not understand what is disease. And again, there is another factor which is playing its role is imposition. Now, the main problem of our approach to this epidemic is the imposition of advices. What I feel that by imposing certain advices and directives will not be sufficient, will not have their good effect as far as changing the human behavior. It only can come through participatory activities. You have to first come down to the people, and in that way, if I'm allowed to say, okay, then how are we going to plan to control the epidemic? The epidemic control strategy-wise, the first thing I would like to divide the entire strategy into two phases in its implementation. Number one is a preparatory phase. What I believe that during the lockdown period, that was the enough and right time for us to prepare ourselves, in which time by doing so, when we start doing such kind of activities in the preparatory phase, there are a few things we have to acquire. The first one is acquire knowledge. Whatever existing knowledge we have, and that comes from the others' experience. For example, India, we got the epidemic later than other countries. So by that time, we had enough experience from the other countries, which we should have exploited, which we should have analyzed, which we should have taken into consideration in framing the strategy in our country. Number two is a research and development section. This part is very important. From the day one of the preparatory phase, the government should have, rather, I should say they must have a kind of a research setting who will continuously go through undertaking studies in different aspects of the disease and giving suggestions to the program, part of the implementation of the disease control program, so that whatever we do, that falls under a very important and strict scientific guidelines. We should not go beyond science. Now, whatever scientifically, as it is more important because this is a new disease, we do not know anything. So someone cannot claim that I know that this disease is such and such, because we did not get enough time to research on that particular aspect. For example, I would cite one example. In the month of January, February, even the political personals, the high-profile political personals, they started saying, "Oh, it's coming in this. We can overcome the disease in the summer. Calcutta experiences very high heat in the summer, so the virus will go die, and there will be no case in the summer." And you see, how can they say? How a political personnel can say this can make this kind of a statement, which only has to be made by a scientific person, and that too, after doing a research in that particular aspect, and after getting a result in that aspect. With this kind of scientific research, ongoing scientific research, the other part we should have given importance is to IEC. That means information, education, and communication. Means that leads to a people's participation. You know, people are saying that don't get panicky, don't be panicked. You know, but my question is, I have raised this issue several times. My question is, did we come down to the people to say that these are the reasons that you should not panic for? These are the arrangements we have made for you people, so that you get the best treatment, so that you get the best facilities for everything in your life, day-to-day life, right from the food, availability of the food, transportation, treatment of COVID, treatment of non-COVID diseases, whatever it is, education, everything. That is a very important part to gain the people's confidence. And really, we did not bother about gaining a people's confidence, and instead we made directives, only directives, and that, I feel, that is simple imposition of something which the people are not going to obey. Moreover, look at the infrastructural development, look at the social standard of our community. This is unfortunate. I am sorry to say, whosoever is listening to me, I am sorry to say that every day in our life, every day, every time you go out, you see violation of different kinds of rules, right from the traffic rules to various other rules by people. They simply do not bother. And you had already raised the issue of driving without the helmet. So this is a rule. This has become a rule. So that kind of a psychological aspect in the population, in the people, are prevailing in our country, in our community. So looking into this, particularly considering into this psychological aspect of the individual person in the society, we should have framed such kind of activities where we would have gone down to the people to gain their confidence and to show that these are the things during the preparatory phase we have done for you, so that when we come down to the next phase, what is known as attack phase, that we get all your cooperation. And for that, again, we need assessment, reassessment, modification of strategy whenever we need. Because unless you educate the people, in COVID terms, what to do, how to do, what we really expect from the people, how the people should behave, how the people should suspect a case of COVID, how the people should consolation to the family of the COVID and help the family of the COVID. We didn't bother to educate our community in this sense. And as a result, everything, just the opposite, just the reverse is happening. People are not helping, rather they are dissociating themselves from the affected individual and the families, making the entire scenario very bizarre and very dangerous. Now in the attack phase, therefore, what should be planned is attacking the disease with definite goals, with our own scientific understanding which is pre-existing, and every day through our research activities, every time we generate some of information, some scientific data, some scientific knowledge, there has to be a solid ground and solid way mechanism to implement this scientific knowledge into general practice, into social practice. And with this kind of translation of laboratory and field science research into our social practice, there has to be a flavor of monitoring and surveillance. Monitoring, and that will lead to repeated evaluation of whatever we have done, right from a common man to a politician, who may be a chief minister, even the prime minister, whosoever it is. There has to be assessment by KAP, that is knowledge, attitude, and practice. The knowledge which is gained, has it been translated into attitude of rightly doing the things according to the knowledge we gather? And lastly, whether that individual has translated his attitude into day-to-day practice or not. And that, when we reach that place, that will give a great success to all of our effort for the disease control, which really we did not do. For example, we are doing various kind of unscientific activities, right? For example, I'll give you one example. Even today, I have been called by several people that we are being supplied by homeopathic medicine and hydroxychloroquine in every house, in every region. They are supplying, they are providing this medication with a level that these are the drugs which are supposed to boost your immunity, number one, and number two, these are the drugs which are going to prevent the infection. This is a very wrong concept and dangerous game it is being played. And these are the issues in governance terms, that they are doing much harm to the society and much harm to all of our effort to control successfully, to guide ourselves to a scientific way. Because again, let me reiterate that we do not have sufficient knowledge. So that is the most important aspect. Because we do not have the right knowledge so far, we do not have any liberty. We just do not have any liberty to play around with any kind of knowledge, any kind of myths, and any kind of interest, personal interest, political interest, whatever kind of interest, even commercial interest. Now, we perhaps all of us will agree with me that COVID has become a very commercially viable disease now. I know that a section of people in our country, even globally, they are minting money. And are we ready with some kind of regulation in this regard? Are we ready with some kind of specification, monitoring and surveillance in every kind of productions, right from a mask to sanitizer to drugs to different kinds of kits and whatever equipment we use in the treatment of the COVID patient? I'm sorry to say, maybe I do not know if I'm wrong. I'll be happy if someone corrects me. But as far as my knowledge goes, that there is no such kind of a monitoring and surveillance, particularly in terms of regulation, its implementation and execution. We do not have that kind of monitoring in every aspect. So that means what I wanted to tell you, that the COVID program, to approach to make a kind of a approach road and inroad to the COVID pandemic, we have to make very organized ourselves, very organized, scientifically judicious, rational. We cannot play with irrational things. We cannot play with illogical activities. We should shed all of our interest, accepting that is related to humankind. It is only the interest of humankind which should play the role in every kind of decision which we take, and whatever kind of activities and policies we implement, everything should eye only one thing, that scientific road, scientific way, and on top of that, the humankind's interest, and then only then we can that can serve our purpose and we can achieve that result. Otherwise, not. For example, as a case study, I would say, I would like to inform you that, for example, diagnosis. For example, the number of cases, the statistics. Can we really rely on the statistics which is being made available to us by different portals for their scientific evaluation and strategy and policy framing? My feeling is that it's a big no, because we do have ample of examples where there is a big question mark and suspicion about the validity, reliability, and reproducibility of whatever data generated and uploaded for everyone to share. Now, that is a kind of a data which is generated not perhaps by the scientists, uninfluenced by political and other forces. This is a data which is generated, which remain restricted largely within the boundaries of political and other ambit. It's not purely scientific, and that makes, because you see, whatever scientific data one tries to generate, and when it is transferred to the other sector like political sector, that gets camouflaged, that becomes a spurious data. And with this kind of a data, for example, we do not yet have any data regarding what is the magnitude of our infection in the country. As I told you, the classification of the clinical presentation from mild, moderate, severe, and asymptomatic. Did we really classify the entire community of our country? Could we do that job in classifying our country to classify in these clinical terms? The answer is no, because we didn't apply such tools which are already available with us with the objective and goal to do that kind of, to generate that kind of data. They are being utilized only for short term and for showing to the people, okay, we are doing this thing. But that is not perhaps serving any kind of scientific purpose. Any kind of purpose is not served which will be useful in developing a kind of a good strategy and solid strategy. Because unless we know this, how can you fight the virus? We have to know the source of the virus. One day you are infected. Now question is asked, how did you get the infection? From whom you got the infection? Now if we are not able to answer that question, we cannot intercept in the transmission manner of the transmission cycle of the virus, and it goes and rolling and escalating the entire situation. And these are the issues which one should take into consideration, particularly when the question comes of framing strategy, implementation of strategy, its evaluation, its monitoring, its surveillance, to reach to the final goal of controlling this particular pandemic situation. Thank you very much for listening here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Amitabh Nandi, for your speech. We are very enriched. Now over to Sharbani Ghoshal. Introducing Dr. Kalpana Kannabiran.
Thank you, Sudeshna. Our next speaker of this international webinar is Professor Kalpana Kannabiran, the present Director of Council for Social Development, Hyderabad. She is also the founding member of Ashmita Resource Center for Women and a part of founding faculty of Nalsar University of Law. As an academic activist, Kalpana is a renowned face in the history of human rights and gender rights movement of India. Among her huge publications, Tools of Justice, Non-Discrimination and Indian Constitution, Violence of Normal Times, Essays on Women's Lived Realities, and of course, De-eroticizing Assault, jointly with her mother, Vasant Kannabiran, one of the Purbonaris of Indian feminism, are very important. Today, Kalpana's focus will be on law, justice, and COVID. Over to you, Dr. Kannaviran.
Thank you. I think I have my mic. Yeah. Thank you very much. And I would like, by beginning with a thanks to Dr. Sharbani for this invitation and to the entire team at the Bijoy Krishna College. I will go straight to what I had proposed to speak about, which is law, law, justice, and COVID-19. We just heard Professor Amitava Nandi giving us an entire health and epidemiology perspective on COVID. So I will not repeat any part of that and won't dwell at all on the health and epidemiological aspects of this. It's, first of all, it's not my province, but also in the interests of time. But not dwelling on it, of course, does not mean that I think it is unimportant. I think it is extremely crucial. And so, but in my opinion, we need to understand the pandemic, and we need to understand the socialities that it has engendered in much broader terms. So that in, I will just attempt to set out the ground within which we can understand this. And I want to just, as a first point in the law and justice angle, I just would like to draw your attention to one particular effect that possibly none of us will think of as an effect of the pandemic situation. It has, of course, brought a lot of tumult in its wake, and so it's necessary to examine it from multiple angles. With reference to law and justice, I will bring before you the most horrific but also the most routine crisis of law and justice during a lockdown, when courts are in suspension and governments are under lockdown. So I draw your attention to the horrible custodial torture and custodial murder of 60-year-old P. Jairaj and his 34-year-old son, J. Benix, by the police in Thoothukudi district of Tamil Nadu on the 22nd of this month. Both men had a small mobile shop, and the confrontation with the police was triggered by the closure of the shop. They were half an hour late in closing their shop. They were not rich people. They were not even upper middle class. They were ordinary. They were a very ordinary family that ran a small mobile store. The confrontation led to their being confined in the police station in Thoothukudi and tortured in the most brutal manner on June 19th. And the torture included sexual assault by the 13 policemen using batons. They were admitted to hospital on the morning of the 20th after being tortured the whole night. They were bleeding profusely and had to be changed several times. But yet, after 3 hours in the hospital, they were taken to the magistrate's court, where they were kept in the compound, and the magistrate dictated the remand order from the first floor without coming to examine them. They were taken to the sub-jail located 100 kilometers away with bleeding injuries, and the jail admitted them without recording their injuries. When they finally became immobile from torture, they were admitted to hospital again on 22nd June from jail. Benix, the son, died that night, and his father, Jairaj, died the following morning. The police version is that the injuries were self-inflicted. That is, that these men were rolling on the ground when the police were questioning them. 1 month prior to this, the same policeman during lockdown had killed by torture a construction worker called Mahendran in the same town. According to the latest reports, a judicial team sent to Tuticorin by the Madras High Court was intimidated by the policemen right from the rank of a constable. And the High Court had to order the district collector to take control of the police station and issued contempt notices against the police. The reason why I feel it is important for us to take note of this is because this is really the situation that we are dealing with during a pandemic. We don't have a regularly functioning government. We don't have regularly functioning courts. Online courts don't work. Ordinarily, somebody could have just run to a court and tried to get an order to have them released. It was not an offense. They would have been let away with a fine for the offense of not closing a shop at a particular time. Also, there is no check on the law enforcement agencies. So the police in this situation have a free hand. So when we are talking about pandemic vulnerabilities, we then have to look at several dimensions of these vulnerabilities. If the disease itself is one source of fear and anxiety for the largest section of people across class, caste, religion, social location, etc., there are a series of other issues that immediately come into focus. We have the question of health. Again, we heard about the question of health. There is the question of work and livelihoods. In the case of Jairaj and Benix, it was a question of livelihood. So keeping a shop open means that you make a certain minimum level of income for that day. But livelihoods also refers to other kinds of work, whether it's construction work, hospitality, and the hospitality sector has been the worst hit in many ways. Artisanal works, the entire range of work that workers who have migrated from their hometowns do, the range of workers in the entire supply chain. So the entire trope of work and livelihoods. What does COVID-19 do to this? We also know, for instance, that the question of Jairaj and Benix being beaten to death is not an atypical question, because right at the height of the COVID lockdown, we saw returning migrant workers being sprayed with insecticide in order to allow them to return to their villages. So we are talking about the extreme levels of impunity and the extreme levels of cruelty that dealing with the pandemic has unleashed with no thought at all that these are in fact direct fallouts of an unregulated shutdown. So surely we need to have a lockdown. People need to be indoors. But what are the safeguards? How do we go about putting these safeguards in place? Because we cannot forget that outside of the pandemic, we are an extremely violent society. We have seen a huge spike in cases of domestic violence. When cases have gone to court asking for wages to be paid to migrant workers during the pandemic, no less than the Chief Justice of the country has said, when they're being given meals every day, why do they need wages? So I'm saying that we need, how do we then move with a regulation that brings in people when the ruling class is not regulated? And the crux of it is there. The crux of it is not in small traffic violations and somebody keeping a shop open for more than half an hour, in old pensioners just crowding to a pension office because they fear that they may not get the pension if they don't crowd there. The crux of the matter is the impunity in the ruling classes that does not put systems in place for ordinary people to be able to survive with dignity. And unless we are able to address that, and unless we actually get to that question, I don't think we've even begun to sort out the problems that this pandemic actually creates for us. We also have the question of housing. All of us are using the term social distancing. In India, you don't need social distancing. Social distancing is achieved by the caste system. Whether we are in urban areas or in rural areas, people are distant based on caste and community, or they will be forced to be distant based on caste and community. So that's the big elephant in the room. So we don't need social distancing. But if we are talking about physical distancing between people, a mandatory physical distancing to prevent infections, to prevent the spread of virus, how do we then assure that physical distancing when decent housing remains a problem? So how do we then speak about physical distancing when either homelessness or the lack of decent housing is the main crisis that people face? So what is the sense in me saying people should be 6 feet apart when the dwelling itself is 5 feet by 5 feet and 6 people are crowded into it? So I think that there are, very, very, very fundamental equity issues that are not specific to 2, 5, 10 people. We are talking about huge numbers here. And the reason why I keep stressing the huge numbers is that the scale of empathetic regulation will have to be in tune with the scale of people who lack access to food, who lack access to routine healthcare, who lack access to decent housing, who have been thrown out of work sites. So there are then several loops in our dealing with the pandemic. So dealing with the pandemic in terms of healthcare is one aspect, but how do we deal with the effects and the consequences of the pandemic? And that really is where law comes in. We have the question of education. I have been following this very closely, and the easy recourse. I mean, I think when we want to share ideas as people of enormous privilege, we are able to just get together in a webinar and share our ideas. But if you tell children, even in the 8th and 9th standard, that they need to download their lessons on a smartphone, or they need to attend online classes, how are you going to ensure that? Who are the children who are going to be able to do it? If the largest number of your children are, because the state is not providing computers or smartphones to the poorest children. So if you are not providing the wherewithal, but yet making online teaching mandatory, what happens to Article 21A of the Constitution, which guarantees the right to education? If you are not ensuring livelihoods and decent food for the largest number of people, what happens to your enjoyment of the right to life under Article 21? If you have the Tablighi Jamaat condemned for weeks and weeks and months after that congregation, where it was in the full power of the state to stop the congregation, but it did not stop it, but you still have all kinds of programs and canards spread, not about the Tablighi Jamaat, but about all Muslims. And yet we have the Supreme Court coming up and saying it's perfectly okay to have the Rath Yatra. I think we are actually dealing with a problem that is triggered by the pandemic, but is not of the making of the pandemic. So how do we then handle the larger questions of equity, of discrimination, of rule of law, of right to education, of the right against discrimination, and most importantly, how do we begin to think about the constitution in the times of the pandemic? Because we may have a lockdown, but the constitution remains in force. The basic structure of the constitution that guarantees a life with dignity, guarantees equal treatment, guarantees non-discrimination, has not been suspended. We have also had courts specifying quite clearly what state responsibility is at all times. And we can't, 70 years into our republic, we cannot be in a situation where the state says when everything is hunky-dory and everything is perfectly all right, the government and the states will fulfill their responsibility. But when there is a crisis, you cannot ask for rights, you cannot ask for decent treatment, nor can you ask for the fulfillment of governmental responsibility. Now, the part 4 of the Constitution, the Directive Principles of State Policy, in fact, set out very clearly what the responsibility of the state is towards its citizens. And the state refers to state governments, it refers to central governments, it refers to subjects that are on the concurrent list, and it refers to every officer acting in the name of the government. So this is really a problem that is, to my mind, much larger. And you have it coming to a head in the most brutal manner in the times of the pandemic. When you have an entire set of migrant workers who have just fallen asleep out of exhaustion on a railway track because they have walked hundreds of kilometers to reach there, and a train mows them down, the question can't be, why did they sleep on the railway track? The question has to be, why were they forced to walk? Why were they not taken home before the lockdown was announced? Why were they not taken home as soon as the lockdown was announced? Why was there such an abject lack of coordination between different state governments that it could not ensure a decent life for workers who hold the economy together? So today we are in fact bemoaning the fact that the economy has collapsed, that there has been a downturn in the economy, but we are not bemoaning the fact that the people who have been worst treated, inexcusably badly treated by this country, have been the workers who have in fact, under terrible, terrible working conditions, actually kept the economy afloat all these years. So before we talk about the economy collapsing, I think we really need to talk about, well, how is it that we are going to issue reparations to the extreme cruelties that have been visited on workers in this country? How are we going to actually ensure that when we have regulations in place, it is not the police lathi that will enforce the regulations, but it will be food, decent work, decent housing, full access to education that will then make it possible for people to actually comply with your regulations. You can't make regulations that it is impossible for people to comply with, because if you force them to comply, if they don't die of virality, they will die of starvation. If they don't die of being locked into a house when the owner has left and not having wages or anything to support themselves, they will die on railway tracks. And this is not, it's not an exaggeration. Every one of these are actual events. When I began with speaking about Jairaj and his son Benix, it is not an isolated incident. We have had reports of this from different states. When a case came up before my own state high court, Telangana High Court, some days ago, when the police went on a rampage smashing cars in a neighborhood, The written counter affidavit of the police was that they used lathis on the cars to check if there were viruses in the cars. This means that anything goes. So how do we, I think as citizens, the medical establishment in close concert with the state will take care, has to take care of the medical arm of this. But as citizens and as public spirited citizens, we need to find ways and find our voice to enforce state accountability in order to see that law and justice in fact prevail and we don't degenerate into a jungle situation, a jungle raj, where it is the survival of the fittest. Because the road we are on, surely that is the direction we are moving in. Thank you.
Thank you, Kalpana Kandakaran, for your educated speech. Now it's time for questions. A lot of questions have come in, but I cannot address all the questions due to time constraint. So I'm randomly choosing two of them. Very relevant question. Number one, in Kerala, it's from Kannan KL. If I pronounce wrongly, in Kerala, community policy is functioning very well. The situation of community policing in North.
Well, you know, I mean, I did not mention Kerala because if I mention Kerala, then the rest of the country, especially the North, you know, you can't even begin to talk about them. I think not just in terms of community policing, in terms of community policing, in terms of contact tracing, in terms of dignity of livelihoods for migrant workers, in terms of education, ensuring education for school children, in terms of public health facilities, and importantly, in terms of the chief minister and the cabinet of ministers holding themselves completely accountable to the people and entering into daily briefings with the people on the way in which the situation is being handled. Kerala is completely a class apart. It's God's own country, shall we say. You know, but we now need to think about the rest of India. A useful track to follow would be for the rest of India to go the Kerala way. But are we willing to do that? Are governments willing to do that? At a time of pandemic, there is no place for egos. There is only place for concerted civic action and concerted state responsibility. That is really the only route to go. So yes, Kerala, of course. But Kerala is shining, you know. I mean, we can actually, with every single point that I mentioned, one can actually hold Kerala up as a beacon.
Thank you, ma'am. Another question for you from Priyanka Pathak. How can we replace administrative policing in social policing? Will social policing be effective in India?
Well, I'm actually very uneasy with the term social policing because I think what is happening now is social policing, you know, which is surveillance. That is, the state delegates surveillance. So you begin to snitch on your neighbors. You begin to, evict tenants even before they have tested positive. You begin to harass them if they have, if one family member is tested. Like I said, you know, we are a very, very exclusionary, very fractured society. And social policing is really not something that I would go with at all. When our friend from Kerala mentioned community policing is a totally different method altogether. It is not social policing. It is, you know, I mean, I can't go into the details of community policing at this point, but it is a form of regulation in which the community and the agencies of state work in very close coordination, constantly reporting back to each other in a way in which you enhance and enable the rights of the community. not in ways in which you segregate or deplete the rights of the community. So I would say community policing, yes, but certainly not social policing.
Thank you, Kalpana ma'am. Basically, questions are pouring in, but we can't, address all the questions due to constraints of time. But the participants do have our email IDs. If they want, they know how to reach out. If they send their questions to us, we'll try to reach our speakers for answers. Thank you very much, Kalpana ma'am. Now it's time for our next eminent speaker, our third speaker of the webinar, Dr. Vishwanath Chakraborty, the popular professor of Rabindra Bharati University and the founding secretary of Bengal Institute of Political Studies, a very well-known face of political analysis at electronic media. Dr. Chakraborty has a repository of knowledge for the ground realities of every nook and corner of West Bengal. His works on the people's participation of West Bengal Panchayati system and Gram Bangla Lorai are real eye-openers for everyone interested in socio-political studies of Bengal. Today he will speak on continuity and discontinuity of policy and governance in COVID era. Dr. Chakraborty.
Thanks to organizer for international seminar on issues of governance in COVID-19 era. I personally thankful to Dr. Roma Bhattacharya, Honorable Principal of Vijay Krishna Girls College, Howrah, convener of the organizing committee, Dr. Sharbani Guho Ghosh. I'm also thankful to all the professors of the Department of Political Science and other departments of Vijay Krishna Girls College for their initiative towards the seminar. And I'm also thankful to Dr. Amitabh Nandi, renowned virologist in Kolkata, Dr. Kalpana Kannabiram, Director of Council for Social Development, Hyderabad, and the next speaker, Dr. Priyoshini Mitro, Research Consultant, Gender and Post Issue, Associate Lecturer, University of London. Friends, I would like to present my view on the changing perspective of state, public policy, and governance. Friends, at the movement, all the countries are self-isolating. Domestically, they face a painful choice between opening their economy and exposing their population to further infection. Outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in a large-scale impact on political, social, economic, and administrative sphere throughout the world. The first time in human civilization is under worldwide distress conditions since the starting of it. The major political and economic power in the world, like USA, China, UK, France, have been severely affected due to the COVID-19. Around 35% world population are jobless at this moment. Around 30% of people are struggling for everyday for their food. Around 45% commercial farms. Play their role in this crisis. Withdrawn of US's support on WHO and other world institutions will make human crisis more serious in nature. In this situation, the age-old policy, public policy obviously, has been under serious challenge. When I am referring age-old, actually it means it started from 1990s onwards with the introduction of neoliberal philosophy. The question, debates are coming whether we should adhere our age-old public policy that was really started up with the introduction of neoliberal philosophy. We have minimized the role of our state based on philosophy of neoliberal economy. We have handed over many welfare activity, important human activity from government to private sector, or more specifically to market, for achieving efficiency, economy, and expansion of the service to all. We have rolled back our administration, replacing market as a major force. We trust the role of private sectors for basic human services under the neoliberal economy. However, COVID-19 shows the failure of the market. The crisis shows that market has failed to ensure our much required service during this pandemic period. Private hospital, nursing home are being criticized for their greedy, inefficient, selfish role. Market failed to provide the basic service to the distressed people in all the account. Many capitalist states, even in Europe, has started to think the introduction of public distribution system in this crisis, from health service to food, providing food for economic generation or any economic support to organized and unorganized sector. The growing role of the state has been observed. In other words, we can say the growing role of the public sector is coming in a big way under this pandemic situation. All the private sectors, once we trusted much more on them, now they are seeking the state assistance, state intervention for their own survival. A thinking is coming up for revival of our state further with new public policy in all the sector, whether it is health, transport, or public distribution. The policymakers under the compulsion now they are thinking seriously for new policy orientation, breaking from the neoliberal perspective. The public policy that has been developed during 1990s with the introduction of LPG project has come under serious challenge. The public policy is now going to shift its focus throughout the world. The policymakers are seriously concerning about the shifting of the public policy and shifting of its focus from private orientation to public orientation under the pandemic situation. From absolute market dependency to expansion of government initiative to cope with the crisis. From individual interest orientation to collective interest orientation is getting more and more focused. The absolute clientelism to collective welfareism is getting much more importance under the analysis of public policy in this period. From financial exclusion to financial inclusion, in other words, we can say equity is getting much more important than efficiency. However, at this juncture, in number of areas of the public administration, intense debates are going on throughout the world. There are a lot of discussion, debates are going on the public policy, on public administration. The public policy and the role of the administration in dealing COVID crisis has been seriously questioned, debated, under discussions. And at this moment, I must say, the public administration is struggling from 5 important puzzles. The first puzzle is about whether it will go for welfareism, complete welfareism, or public administration should leave the market dimension. In other words, I can say the first debate is around the welfareism versus market dimension. The second debate within the public administration discourse going on about continuity versus discontinuity aspect. The third debate that is going on in the discussion of public administration is about the permanency versus advocacy. Permanency versus advocacy. The fourth debate that are generating in the discourse of public administration is about transparency versus public order. And fifth, but most important debate is going on about the life versus livelihood. Friends, I have already discussed, I have already highlighted some points that the revival of the state is coming up in a big way, replacing market, which has been observed throughout the world, even in the European Union also. Even the capitalist state in Europe are also engaged to expand the state role to deal COVID-19 crisis. And this has resulted due to the failure of the market. The scholar in public administration and policy sciences are completely divided on the question of continuity of the public policy. Many advocated that the COVID-19 crisis has compelled the state to rethink its public policy in new shape, in new form, in new way, and perhaps the old normal will not return further in the discourse of the public policy. Therefore, under the prevailing situation, public administration in general, policy science in particular, should be reoriented. However, many experts in country this view. However, many experts they are contradicting that no, this is the new types of the thinking is coming for a particular situation. But as soon as COVID will overcome, will end, the old normal in the discussion of the public administration will prevail in all the sector of our life. So there is a intense debate among the scholar of public administration. Some are advocating that in the discourse of public administration and policy science, the old discourse will not further come up. A new normal will prevail, and that new normal will be totally different from old normal. So, but there are some scholars who still believe that the old discourse of the public administration will prevail as soon as the COVID-19 crisis will overcome this crisis. Friend, public administration is really facing a critical dilemma under the COVID-19 crisis, whether it should go for permanency or it should take long-term, that means whether it will go for long-term program, policy, project, keeping in view the COVID-19, or whether the public administration should be reoriented, focusing on the present crisis. That means whether public administration should run on ad hoc basis. So there is again dilemma among the administrator whether they will go for long-term policy planning or they will just cope up the present crisis, or they will formulate the policy program and run administration based on ad hocism. So there is an intense debate throughout the world. Keeping in view the time, resource, and manpower constraint, many policymakers prefer to make policy and administrative management on ad hoc basis. However, a section of the experts opine advocacy can lead to more crises in near future, keeping in view the COVID crisis. As nobody knows the time for the end of the COVID crisis. Nobody knows about the end of the COVID crisis period. Therefore, which I wanted to recall again, that I started my lecture saying throughout the world, all the government are facing at this moment a painful choice between reopening their economy and exposing their population to further infection. However, for almost all the countries, the government is facing another serious dilemma on the question of life and livelihood. Not only of the third world countries, even the advanced countries cannot continue their lockdown for a long period. Life is a serious challenge, not only for COVID-19 infection, but also from livelihood question. Public administration is really facing a serious dilemma on this matter. Last but not least, the issue of transparency versus public order under COVID crisis is another important problematic area in public administration. The experts are divided on this question. Many experts in public administration consider under COVID-19 situation, on all the account, free flow of information, on all the aspects, free flow of information is precondition for effectively dealing the COVID-19 crisis. However, in contrary to this view, a section of the expert in public administration opine that citizens should not be given all kind of information for maintenance public order. So, in the name of maintenance of public order, some expert in public administration, they prefer that the state should keep a role like a gatekeeper. All information should not be disseminated to the people, because if you provide more information, then there should be more hue and cry, there should be more rumor. So that will create another problem. So state should come forward to play a gatekeeping role for the dissemination of knowledge. However, this is the view of a section of the expert in public administration. In contrary to this view, most of the experts consider the information should be shared with the people. All information should be shared with the people. Information flow should be there should be a free flow of communication, free flow of information. Otherwise, it will be very difficult to deal with the COVID situation. Friend, with this, now I would like to focus on the governance aspect of the public administration, obviously on theoretical perspective. We all of we know that 8 principles of governance are very important. The accountability, transparency, responsiveness, equitable inclusiveness, consensus, participation, rule of law, and efficiency. Throughout the world, the experts are giving different opinion again on the question of the nature of governance to deal the COVID situation. the 8 principles of good governance are getting a new shape, new orientation, new look under the COVID pandemic situation. Some are getting more important, other principles are not getting so much important. Say, for instance, the public participation, which is very important. The earlier speaker also said, the public participation does not only mean the people's participation, the public debates, physical participation is not possible, but at the same time, government should take the public opinion in different way, and government also should take the opinion of the different stakeholder to meet the crisis. Again, most of the country throughout the world, a kind of authoritarianism has been shown. The government, more and more centralization of the administration has been looked. It has been looked that administration under the pandemic situation, without consulting public, without consulting the major stakeholder, they are taking the decision basically based on bureaucrat. And in that way, the state is becoming more and more bureaucratic in nature, more and more authoritarian nature, and under the pandemic situation, we have implemented one after another law, emergency law, and that actually fostering, that also influencing the state to get a character of authoritarian in nature. And that is one of the important question that that is coming in a big way under the discourse of the public administration. Despite the difference in the policy introduced in different countries, sometimes within the same countries, the response to COVID-19 has involved action by all the level of the government and other public bodies and agencies, especially those responsible for health, civil protection, education, social issues. It has also rested on the frontline role of the local authorities as those who are closest to the citizen and their need. The effectiveness of the response to the COVID-19 emergency greatly depend on the level of the coordination and cooperation between the different sectors involved. It also depends on the active participation of civil society as regard not only the respect of the confinement measures, but also the direct involvement in voluntary work aimed at sustaining the response effort. It is crucial for response to COVID-19 to comply with fundamental principles of democracy, but at the same time, the state cannot adapt the authoritarian principles in order to ensure or in order to meet the COVID crisis. Many experts in public administration completely differ the authoritarian measures adopted by the different government to meet the COVID situation. So most of the experts consider that even under the emergency situation, the public should be taken into consideration. Public confidence should be taken into consideration. Public opinion should be taken into consideration. Public participation at the community life should be taken more effective way to manage the COVID crisis. The best example is throughout the world is some of the small country like Vietnam, some of the important state like Kerala. It is the community participation that actually giving additional value to meet the crisis. So there may be different point of view among the expert in administration about the application of the democratic principles in this crisis, but at the same time, the most success stories coming where participation, democratic values has been observed effectively in dealing with the COVID situation. With this word, I must stop here. If you have any query, definitely I will respond to this query. Once again, I am really thankful to the organizer of the Vijay Krishna Girls College. Most of the teacher, my old friend, when I worked in Belur Ram Krishna Mission, I had a long association with them. Still, I have association with them. This word, I am thankful to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Vishwanatha, for such a
Check
thought-provoking. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Am I audible? Yeah. Thank you, Vishwanatha, for your thought-provoking speech. Now, a lot of questions are in for you, but I'm choosing one randomly. The question is from Lopamutra Ghosh. To what degree should privacy and other rights be for the sake of public safety?
I must say, Lopa, that democratic values should not be sacrificed in any way. I completely disagree with the view that states should play a gatekeeping role to disseminate the information knowledge to the citizen. More transparency means more effective dealing of COVID situation. Any crisis can be dealt more effectively if you are well communicated. If your citizen are well communicated, all information has been flowed. Free flow of communication has been done from government side. So to me, in the context of the debate, how much the state should be democratic, how much should not be, I am completely in favor of democratic environment. I am completely in favor for the application of democratic principles, the application of the good governance principle for dealing more effective way. Because the most success story throughout the world so far has been observed where public participation has been achieved to deal this COVID crisis, where community participation has been ensured, where government has adopted a transparency and accountability. There we got the success. So unless you ensure your administration efficiency, unless you ensure the accountability, efficiency, and democratic principles to deal this COVID crisis, you cannot get any success story. You cannot get any success story. So I'm in favor of complete application of the democratic principle in dealing this COVID crisis.
Thank you, Vishwanatha. Now over to shout for our next eminent, Dr. Payashini Mitra.
Thank you, Sudeshna. I'm audible?
Yes.
The final speaker of today's international webinar is going to address the issues of governance during this pandemic times from an absolutely different perspective, which is grossly neglected in times of any national or international crisis, but lives and livelihoods of a considerable number of people are involved in it. This is the turn of Dr. Payashini Mitra, an associate professor of Birkbeck Sports and Business Center, University of London. As an athletes' rights activist, Payashini, through her research and advocacy, is continuously helping the athletes to win legal cases on complex gender issues. Our very own Duti Chand episode is one such. Today, she will deliver her presentation on sports governance and gender inequality in this COVID period. Over to Payashini. Unmute yourself.
Thank you so much, Sharvanidhi. Am I audible?
Yes.
Thank you. I was surprised to hear that when Principal Srimati Ruma Bhattacharya said that I bring in some international element to the international webinar. I refused to sort of admit that, because I've grown up and spent most of my life in Kolkata and is currently in London for work reason. And I believe that I am, even though I am going to talk about international sport and the effect of COVID-19 on international sport, I do believe that I am not an outsider. Having said that, once again, thank you to Dr. Sarbani Ghoshal for asking me to speak in this fantastic webinar with very respected speakers before me, all of whom I have looked up to and listened to before. I feel extremely humbled to be here today. And thank you to Principal Srimati Ruma Bhattacharya for your kind invitation as well. So I have a presentation, I have a few images. I know already a lot of time has gone. I'm the last speaker. It's always tough to be the last speaker. I'm trying to share my screen. I'm not sure how much I will be good at that, but let me try. Okay, a window, and let me see. I'm trying to share my presentation. It's Can you hear me? Hello? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
I will, but I don't.
Yes, we can hear you.
Have been able
I think there is something problem in sharing the screen.
share
We are
No, it
not
has
getting.
not been. No, it has not been shared.
No, it's not being shared. We're not getting any presentation. But you are audible.
Right now, she is not audible. Hello?
Hello, Pershni, are you here? Hello?
I think she is not here. I
No,
can't.
she left the meeting.
She has left, I think.
Unmute.
হ্যালো অমিত, অমিত কি মিটিং এ আছে?
না, ওনাকে পাওয়া যাচ্ছে না সর্বানিধি, উনি নেই মিটিং এ।
না, উনি মিটিং এ নেই।
উনি নেই। উনি বুঝতে পারছেন কি নেই সেটা, মানে
হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ, আমাকে জিজ্ঞেস করেছে ক্যান ইউ সি মি। এসেছে?
না না গো, এখনো দেখতে পাচ্ছি না।
কি হলো, কি ঢুকতে পারছে না?
Amit, can you try to put her in? Amit?
হ্যালো অমিত।
Amit?
Yeah, it's not possible. I don't know her number.
ও লিখছে আই এম ট্রাইং।
It is better to share the link to her
আবার লিংকটা দিয়ে দেবো,
WhatsApp number, or I can also mail.
আর আবার লিংকটাই আবার দিয়ে দিচ্ছি।
Yeah, better to do the link.
কি হলো ব্যাপারটা?
No, she has lost her link, I think. I think lost a connection or something like that.
লিখেছে আই এম ট্রাইং।
Send her the link again.
I have done it.
So send her the link again. It will be better to send the link again.
Hello.
Yes, you can see her.
Yes, yes.
Sorry, I just logged in through my phone, so I don't think I can share my presentation. What I will do is there are a couple of images I want to start with, and I will show it on my computer screen. I'll just take the camera towards my computer screen and see if you can see it. Does that work? Are you able to hear me?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay. Sorry for the confusion. So let me try to see if I can. I can't reverse my camera. So my topic is women who gender inequality in sports in a post-COVID world. That's what I was going to talk about. It's very different in the sense that, as Sharbhanidhi just said, that I'm going to talk about sports in particular, which is very different from what has been already talked about. It's my computer which is acting up, so I'm trying to see how I can show you some of the images that I have on my computer. So one of the things that you will remember that happened around around the time, and I will try to show you this image if you can see it. Can you see the image on my computer? So
Yes.
it's about the idea of the invisible enemy. So I'm going to start this with quoting some of my favorite people in the world. Not really. So I'm starting this by quoting Donald Trump, who said that the COVID-19 is the invisible enemy. We are at war with an invisible enemy. And we have Boris Johnson kind of talking about an enemy as well, saying this enemy can be deadly. Can you see it on my screen? So we see that all these world leaders are invoking a wartime language, and it's no different in case of our Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who says virus may be invisible enemy, but our COVID warriors are invincible. Are you able to see my slide?
Yes.
Thank you. So these are mostly the main images that I had. So what we are noticing here, that there is a wartime language that is being invoked by each of these world leaders, national leaders, talking about an invisible enemy. And that brings me to the idea, um, uh, and also I'll have another slide which I will show you uh, is about, the idea of a World War III that was being talked about between India and China. So obviously Modi took it a bit too seriously. And I have another image here which talks about how the Sun reporting how nuclear World War III is serious threat if India and China fist fights, escalate conflict, and allies get dragged in. So we see this kind of a rhetoric as far as COVID-19 is concerned, and especially how these particular national leaders, Trump, Boris Johnson, Modi, are talking about COVID-19, trying to invoke certain kind of nationalism as well, and trying to fight an invisible enemy. Now, this wartime language is what makes me interested here, because while I am going to talk about sport, but I'm going to refer to a few things from World War time. At the end of Second World War, there were 156,000 women soldiers on active duty in the US Army, about 2.6% of the total number of soldiers in US Army at that time. After the war, after the end of the World War II, there were rapid demobilization and the women were largely affected. By the middle of 1948, the number of women was down to approximately 8,000. So from 156,000, the number of women in the army came down to 8,000, which was about 1.4% of the total number of soldiers at that time in the US Army. So obviously there were a reduction in the number of male soldiers as well, but obviously the percentage was much higher when it came to women. So what we see here is a crisis situation where that during a crisis situation, there is inclusion of women in workforce, and as soon as the crisis is over, we are excluding women as before. Am I audible? If you can show me a hand. Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
I'm sorry I can't show you the slides. Okay, my next slide. So now, another interesting thing happens during World War I. The history of women's football has been interrupted by the whims of administrators who felt women could play football to raise funds during the world wars, but immediately afterwards banned women's football. And this happened during World War I. In 1917, at a weapons factory in Preston, England, women, Preston in North England, women footballers created the first known women's football team, Dept Ladies. On Boxing Day 1920, the team defeated St. Helen Ladies in Liverpool. The match attracted a record crowd of 53,000 spectators. The Dept Ladies traveled abroad and played against men in America. The women footballers took everyone by surprise and began to attract more and more spectators. But soon in 1921, the Football Association, which was the Federation for Football Governance in England, banned women's football. And on the grounds of the fact that the game of football apparently is quite unsuitable for women and ought not to be encouraged. That's what they argued. So you see again, during a crisis time, during the World War, how women are being included in the workforce, whether it be the army or be sport, and then right after there is a deprioritization of them being part of normal life. Another interesting example from recent history, as far as Indian Army is not really recent, there is a connection. Women nurses who were among the first to join the military as early as 1888 in India were often taken as prisoners of war. It has been reported that over 350 female nurses either died or were taken prisoners of war or disappeared during the First and Second World Wars. However, while arguing against the recruitment of women in combat roles or leadership position in the army, very recently, this was in the news very recently, R. Balasubramaniam, advocate for the central government, said if a woman officer was taken as a prisoner of war, it would be a cause for extreme physical, mental, and psychological stress for the service and the government, and such a situation could be best avoided by keeping women away from direct combat. So note the contradiction here. So while it was okay for nurses to be prisoners of war several years back, it is not okay for these women to be in combat roles or in leadership position in army, because they could be prisoners of wars, and that will be more difficult to deal with than male soldiers, men in the army being prisoners of wars. That's what the advocate of the central government argued earlier this year at the Supreme Court. When some of these women army officers appealed to be allowed to go for combat positions or be in leadership position in the army. So on one hand, what we then see in all these three examples that I give you, that at the time of a crisis situation, it is important to have these women included, because you need that workforce, you need extra workforce. And the moment that need is gone, women are again being treated as second grade. So there is a deprioritization of women's labor. Now, interestingly, and this is really not very related to what I am arguing here, but I will still mention that who are these invisible COVID warriors that Narendra Modi was talking about. He said that even if the enemy is invisible, there are these invincible COVID warriors. And who are these COVID warriors? Now, if I look at the data from England, for that matter, NHS, the National Health Services in England, very well known for the health services it provides, it has 77% women as its staff. NHS, England, has 77% of NHS workforce are women. So when you are talking about COVID war, who are the majority of these people who are your COVID warriors? In case of India, it's not that high, but still 38, but taking this data from a WHO report, 38% of health workers in India are women. May not be again in leadership position, may not be as many doctors, but 38% of health workers in total in India are women, according to WHO report published in 2016. So a much larger section of these invincible warriors that Modi is referring to are women. And I felt that it's an important point that I wanted to make here, that if this is being equated to world wars, World War I or World War II, or wars that countries have fought before, interestingly, the people who are in the forefront at this time are women. But it will be interesting to see once we've overcome this pandemic, how these women are going to be treated. Are you able to still hear me?
Yes.
So my next slide was about sport. Now, sports in a post-COVID world, and while I talk about you know the post-COVID world, we also need to take into account, because I'm talking about world sport, and even if I don't talk about world sport, it is important to note the police violence against minorities in many countries, which happened in India and also in other parts of the world, especially with the recent BLM, what we have seen in the US. So there are the repercussions of both this huge incidents in what is happening to sport today. Now, why sports? Now, a lot of us may feel that when we have so much more to talk about, why sports? It's just a frivolous endeavor. It's not something really primary. But then, as Shorvanindi as well mentioned, that there are livelihood issues. There are people who are part of sport as an industry or sport as a culture, whose rights needs to be addressed. So one of the huge impact of COVID-19 that has happened this year is the postponement of the Summer Olympics, even though I'm talking about elite sport, really high performance sport here. But the impact that we have seen is that Summer Olympics, for the first time in its history since 1896, have been postponed by a year. So what has happened is cancellation of training, cancellation of countless competition that leads up to the Olympics, and cancellation of very basic local, regional competition as well. That does affect athletes' performance. The uncertain possibilities of infection undermine the idea of playing together. That is crucial to sporting practices. So playing together, playing against each other is very crucial to the practice of sport. And we can't really have matches over, on the web. We can't really do much online if we are, talking about athletes. So that is something that's very different to sport. It is also important to understand the diversity of athletes, the facilities they have access to, the inequality in access to healthcare, and how that impacts an athlete compared to another. So the public health care system in one country would be very different from another, and that also has a huge impact on an athlete's preparation for for the next tournament, or even if it's not Olympics, but could be Olympics as well. The ad hoc and arbitrariness of decision making due to COVID-19 by nation heads, as well as sport officials. So here is an emergency situation. So we take very immediate decision. That has been the kind of what we have been seeing everywhere is ad hoc decision for lockdown, ad hoc arbitrary decision of calling off lockdown. This is not only happening in India, but elsewhere in the world. There have been a lot of arbitrariness in decision making, and so in the field of sport. Now, sport governance is a bit complex. It's not only about the national government or the ministries of sport, but it's also about the sport organizations. and their autonomy. So you will be probably aware of the fact that there is always this kind of a fight between sport governing bodies and national governments and ministries about autonomy in sport, because a lot of these sport governing bodies, the national ones, abide by the rules of the international ones. For example, the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, has a charter which is supposed to be followed by the Indian Olympic Association. There are regulations of the World Athletics which are supposed to be followed by the Athletics Federation of India. So you have these connection to the international body of sport, and therefore often it becomes difficult to understand who is actually governing sport. And also then we have clubs and corporatized sport in today's day and age. So this kind of complicates the whole structure, and it's difficult to then understand that who is responsible for protection of athletes during the economic fallout. I mean, obviously the COVID-19 is, it's not only about COVID-19, but it's really the impact of the economic fallout due to COVID-19 that we are all really worried about. And the answer to this is not straightforward because of the very complex governance structure of sport across the world. Now, in such a situation, as I have already mentioned, the inequalities and shortfalls of public health systems and national sports infrastructure further heightens the inequalities in sports opportunities. So what is happening in the UK necessarily, I mean, an athlete in the UK necessarily is not facing as much barrier or issues as an athlete in India, necessarily. So what I have now is, again, another slide I would like to quickly show you. I don't know how much you are able to see it. So what I am going to focus on here is women's sports at risk due to impending recession. And you will see some of these articles published in The Guardian or the BBC talking about coronavirus and how it's going to impact women's sport. So once you have this situation, what is happening is, a lot of other issues that were being raised about inclusion, about non-discrimination, are taking a back seat. When you are struggling to, during this pandemic, what we have noticed is issues that were raised about women's leadership in sports. At this point, they all took a back seat. Concerns over media representation of women's sport, which was really increasing after a lot of hard work being put in by women, women activists, for years. What we have seen is suddenly that everything takes a back seat. Concerns over cancellation of women's competition or league. Now, what happens is, immediately when things can resume, these federations or governing bodies are more willing to ensure that the men's events, the men's tournaments, which are obviously generating more money, are able to resume. And because of the economic fallout, the financial situation becomes so important that the focus goes to the particular section of groups of people playing sport who can raise the funds back for the industry. So what happens is women's sport again being pushed to the margin. Also issues, for example, sexual harassment issues within sport were being raised. Now again they get a backseat. What I work on specifically is with women athletes who have DSD, who have differences of sex development, or women with high testosterone, and their rights to compete. Now that issue is deprioritized because of this pandemic and the economic fallout as a result of it. So all these rights-based concerns that we have been raising are not as important anymore. And uh, now, I'll just quickly talk about a little bit about what is happening in India. I am in touch with several coaches from different parts of India, um, and the feedback that I get is the moment because we are aware of the migrant worker situation in India. Now, what happened to these young athletes who were staying in sport hostels from where they were training once the lockdown was called? All of them were asked to leave the hostels and go home. Many of them um, didn't, they didn't really have a really proper place to go back to. Now, did that put them in higher risk of getting COVID? Um, and even if I don't consider that, the other issue that these young athletes faced was that of lack of nutritional support that they get because of being in a sports hostel. So what happened to them is they are going back home without any financial support, staying at home at a high risk of getting COVID, as well as at the risk of not getting enough nutrition, which is required for an athlete to do better. Um, so, and we also notice lack of support for support staff. A lot of them are not full-time staff, not permanent staff, and athletes in various sports who are amateur athletes. So, if we don't take into account those who stay in sports hostels and have support at other times, there are also athletes who are amateur, not really professional. Do let me know when my time is towards the my time is up. Do let me know, please. So individual and non-governmental initiatives that I have noticed.
Shorten a little, please. Shorten a little, please.
Okay. Okay. So so there have been a lot of individual initiatives at this time, as we see elsewhere as well, which have helped. There's one initiative taken by Go Sports Foundation about Play for India, which is helping support staff. And across the world also, there have been unions, athlete unions, who have been doing a lot of work to support athletes who don't have a salary at the end of the month, or who haven't been able to make as much money. For example, Colombian Player Union have proactively reached out to several women footballers. In Panama, we have noticed something similar. So can sport overcome this crisis? Sport can overcome this crisis with more long-term structural change. Sport is a very hierarchical structure which lacks accountability. Now, Professor Kannabiran was talking about impunity of the ruling class. There's some noise. Can you? There's some noise, and I cannot speak if there's so much noise coming from someone.
Someone has opened. Please turn off. Please turn off.
Please turn off the microphone. Please turn off the microphone.
So one thing that Dr. Kannabiran was talking about was the fact that the impunity of the ruling class, and I think that also happens within sport governance. We do have such a hierarchical structure in sports that there is very little accountability. Of course, some of us are working hard to sort of change that, but all this work is taking a backseat because of the crisis that sport is faced with today. Recognizing women athletes as workers and prioritizing their right to work and right to non-discrimination is extremely important. And that is where probably things could change and things could be better. We may have some better outcome. So not allowing deprioritization of women's issues in sport or issues of non-discrimination, even within women's sports, is key at this point. There are some mechanisms to battle that, but there are some mechanisms, there are some people, there are some organizations like FIFPro or World Players Association. These are like huge unions working with smaller unions of athletes across the world. But this is still not very well structured. And in countries where rights of athletes are most endangered, that is where we see that fewer such unions exist. And India is not an exception. So we need to sort of probably do a lot more as activists at this time. And since we don't see so much of work from the sport organizations or from the government as far as sport, as far as protection of athletes and other stuff is concerned, it is up to the unions and up to non-profit initiatives to take care of that. I'll end there. Um, uh, and I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, for your enriching speech. There is a question for you. Basically, it's my question or question from my end. The question is that as you are staying in England and you started with Boris Johnson, so obviously the question that has come to my mind is that Boris Johnson, so far I remember, was the first person who talked about herd immunity. So I have a British people are following that idea, or they're kind of maintaining right now the precautions for COVID that we are actually trying to maintain in India.
I think again, Principal Bhattacharya mentioned about Bournemouth last weekend, where they were the beach was so crowded recently. There were no social distancing maintained there, and that is obviously there is a fatigue. There is a fatigue everywhere. All of us. Kashmir has been going through this for a long time, a lockdown, but the rest of the world isn't used to it. There is a fatigue, and therefore people are going out in the beach, and there could be a second wave. We have already seen today in the newspaper that Leicester has very high level of COVID infection at this point, and therefore they're closing down the whole city, trying to block it at this point. So there is all these ways of second wave. But as we have seen in India with my friends, especially post Amphan in Bengal, that you have to prioritize your needs and do what is needful. There are times when you cannot really follow social distancing rules as much because the need of the hour is different.
Dr. Mitra, is still Dr. Nandi is still there? Dr. Amitabh Nandi is still there? One question for him. Is he there? Am I audible to you, sir? Amitabh Nandi? Someone is presenting the screen. Dr. Amitabh Nandi?
Perhaps he is not here.
He is not. He has left him, I think. Okay.
Just left.
Shall I move on to the next? Is he there?
No, Dr. Nandi is not here. Dr. Nandi is not here.
Okay. Then it's time to sum up. Over to Sharvanidhi.
I now request Dr. Uddalak Roy, the Vice President of Bengal Institute of Political Studies, to sum up the event, sir. Sir, once again, I also, on behalf of Vijaya Krishna Girls College, render my thanks to you for your collaboration.
Thanks to all the participants and excellent deliberations. And how to sum up, because so much has been talked about. It is from the beginning to the end. The tone was set by your principal madam when she was talking about the taking decision, the risk of taking decision, and implementation and non-implementation of decision. Especially with reference to our recent government decision about the examination system. What Dr. Nandi was talking was basically large part of his medical and clinical aspect, which I am not a competent person to comment on, but he was also talking about the governance part, which he insisted on in kind of a public health system development of and how to govern this COVID situation. He was much more insistent on public health system. Now, the public health system is in a dilemma. I think if you follow the Noam Chomsky's Kerala debate, Kerala dialogue, that Noam Chomsky was saying that Kerala has successfully managed the thing largely due to its presence of a strong public health system, which many of the states are lagging behind. So far, Kalpana Kannivaran madam was Professor Kalpana Kannivaran was speaking. He talked about operation of caste, class, and everything, but basically his contention, her contention was about the question. The question was very much framed by her. That is, how can we regulate the ruling class, or rather, who will regulate the ruling class? So, so all our deliberations, including insistence on caste, equity, and I also agree with a point in that social distancing is a harmful word to use in this context, because already India is fragmented with so many social distancing things from the past. The actual thing what we want to mean, I think, physical distancing to prevent the infection. So I am in a sense, I think that we have to rethink about the word social distancing, because so much social distancing is there, and there is no point in enhancing and increasing that the distancing part of the thing. Professor Vishwanath Chakraborty was talking about the crisis of neoliberal economy, and he is apprehensive that most of the state may relapse back to old economy, welfare economy, and neoliberal economy is in some sort of crisis. And we was also talking about that public policy focus will shift from private to public welfare, and was talking about 5 major debates prevailing in the current public administration theoreticians and 8 principles of good governance. And the interesting point he was talking about that debate, that what we are talking about new normal, we are talking about again restoring public health system, public distribution system, public education system. But there is also a debate that after the crisis is over, there may be again a tendency to turn back to the old normal, that is neoliberal school of thing. So the things may kind of go in a round way. Payashni Mitra was talking an interesting thing about gender discrimination. It is not really, in a sense, gender discrimination, but whole of our talk was centered around that how now and then women sportsmen were used by the state, women nurses were used by the state, and again when the crisis period was over, they were marginalized to the domestic front. The good example was the women's football during the First World War, when for fundraising purpose the government allowed it, and then thereafter they again banned it. And rightly, she also pointed that this nowadays sports administration is very complex with so many private and corporate and everything, and given the hierarchical structure of the whole thing, and definitely there is a ad hocism and patronizing element is always there. So about Indian women athletes and sports persons staying in the hostel, and what kind of situation they are in. It's really a big question, and if they are pushed back to their home again, who will give them the necessary economic and other kind of supports that are related or required. So there is a kind of a the whole range of things were covered, and it was an excellent experience and a fruitful experience to attend this seminar. So again, thanks to all of you for the organizing such a excellent seminar. Thank you.
Sharbani, Professor Nondi is there. You can ask him.
Okay. Can I ask the question now? Dr. Nondi, am I audible to you? Am I
Professor
audible?
Nondi, again unmute yourself, Professor Nondi. Yeah, now please ask you.
Yes, I did it.
There is a question for you. Just a second, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
Okay, just a second, sir. Just a second.
Hello.
Unmute.
Yes, if the question is Onkita Chakraborty. The question is that those who have immune diseases and are taking immunosuppressant drugs, what would be how would they feel about it? I mean, about this COVID-19 virus, how would that affect them?
Well, it's a very interesting question and very interesting issue she has raised. And as a medical professional, the approach towards this kind of patients, definitely one has to think about how the virus and the immune system would behave in such cases. Because, the entire pathogenesis, whatever clinical features develop, is an outcome of the immune response towards the virus. And basically, it's an hyperimmune response towards the viral infection, which results in production of multiple cytokines and to very large quantity, leading to a state which is very commonly known as cytokine storm. And this kind of cytokine storm a process and the patient suffers. Now, the main approach towards the treatment in absence of a very antiviral drug against anti-COVID is therefore to make a balancing act in terms of regulating the hyperimmune response to bring it down to not immunosuppressive state, but a kind of a balancing state where the patient is allowed to continue his immune response, produce the necessary multiplication and development of virus application, so that gradually the stimulation
I think several mics are on. Participants,
Yes,
please mute yourselves.
Participants, please mute your microphones. We can't hear Dr. Nandi.
Vishwanath, I think.
Yeah, you can ask our treasurer Pradipta Mukherjee, Professor Pradipta Mukherjee.
Let us now wrap up with Pradipta.
Yeah, Pradeep.
So,
Yeah.
Pradeep,
Yes, madam. Well, it's time to say, propose the vote of thanks. Good evening to all. I deem it a very great honor and privilege to propose the vote of thanks before the august presence of the eminent speakers, organizers, and participants. First of all, let me start by giving thanks to the Honorable Principal of Vijay Krishna Girls College and the President of this webinar, Dr. Ruma Bhattacharya, for her inaugural lecture and constant guidance, support, and encouragement to her staff and colleagues. Well, thanks due to Dr. Sheta Guho, IQAC coordinator of the college, Dr. Amit Majumdar, technical director of the webinar, Shubhradeep Das for the preparation of flyer and certificates, Dr. Sudeshna Mitro, she is interacting as the moderator. Didi, thank you very much. Kaushik Bandhopadhyay, Shoma Chando, Tanusri Das, Ranjana Sarkar Ghosh for the communication part, and most importantly, Sharbani Ghoshal, the convener of the webinar. And thanks due to Professor Rajkumar Kothari, Honorable President of Bengal Institute of Political Studies and Professor of Political Science working in Vidyasagar University, Professor Udalok Rai, our BIF's Joint Secretary, Vice President, and Dr. Devashish Nandi, our Joint Secretary. Also thanks due to Dr. Abhishek Kormokar, our Executive Member. Now, for whom we are actually here, the Professor Kalpana Kannaviran, Director Council for Social Development, Hyderabad, Professor Amitav Nandi, eminent virologist, Professor Vishwanath Chakraborty, Professor of Political Science in the Department of Political Science, Rabindra Bharati University, also the Secretary of Bengal Institute of Political Studies, and Dr. Poishni Mitro. And also thanks, I propose my thanks to the august and patient hearing of the participants. Without them, the webinar cannot be a success. Thanks to all. Thank you.
Amit, Dr.
Okay.
Amit Majumdar, who is our technical director and for whom we all are here and we can make it
Yes,
happen.
actually.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Sharbani.
So let's end here.
Okay, thank you. Let's end here.
Thanks a lot.